I speak to you in the name of the living God, blessed Trinity, and lover of your souls. Amen.
Amen.
You may be seated. So I'm standing down here, right? This is a little weird for those of you who are used to 11:15 services. Normally I'm up there. But I want to prep you for something. Something strange is going to happen to the organ in a few moments, okay? I promise you the organ didn't blow up at the 8 a.m. service. But I want to remind you of a 2014 music artist, Taylor Swift, her song, Shake It Off. Now, she made popular the phrase, haters gonna hate. So let's hear a little riff from that, Todd. Thank you. All right, now, my son loves dancing, so I'm going to invite him to come do a little bit of the sermon with me. So throughout the sermon, you can hang out up here, okay? And when it's time, you can show everybody your moves, all right? So a hater is someone who can't be happy about things in life that make you happy, right? LB, what's something that makes you happy?
All my Hot Wheels, these are my Hot Wheels.
I knew he was going to say that. We did not practice this. Hot Wheels City and Hot Wheels, in case you... So, did you know that when a hater is doing their hating, they can say mean things about you just because you like Hot Wheels? Isn't that silly?
Yes.
Yeah, totally shouldn't do that. So haters, they point out something you didn't get perfectly, and they might say something mean about your Hot Wheels just because they're jealous. That's what a hater does.
Yes.
Yeah. They expose the flaws of someone whose successes they're jealous of. And haters can make us feel sad, but only if we let them. So Jesus faces some haters in today's gospel. Now the story begins with a young Jesus, and sometimes we forget, right? Jesus was just barely out of his 20s. Can you believe it? He's just barely out of his 20s in this scene, and he seems to have returned to his hometown after landing his first real job. His ministry of a traveling teacher has literally just begun, and he's home because he's still on the church roster, and it's his turn to go up and read at the lectern. So he does that. He gets up to read in his hometown congregation. Now, for those of you a little older than my son here, do you remember the first time you went back to your childhood hometown, maybe even your childhood church for the first time? Okay, I remember the first time that I went back to the little Italian Pentecostal church that I went to on the suburbs on the east side. And as soon as I stepped into the foyer, I felt a hand on my head. It was the retired pastor who baptized me. And he was tousling my hair.
How?
Yeah, that's what he was doing. Like a child's hair or like a puppy. And as I read today's gospel, I could almost feel the hands aching in the synagogue to reach out and tousle Jesus' hair as he's reading the scriptures. That's what was happening. Jesus was home. And while that gave the hometown folk the warm fuzzies, what it meant for Jesus was that all of the amazing things he'd done in other places didn't really matter, not to the people at home. So elsewhere, they called him teacher and master. But here, they just, hey, isn't that Joe's kid? It's literally what the gospel says. Isn't that Joseph's son? Jesus had literally just come from the next city over, where in the span of a few short weeks, he brought back a little girl from the dead, healed a rich man's son, cast out a demon, cured a woman who was sick, returned the sight of 2 blind men, gave voice to a man who was mute, and helped someone who was deathly sick finally get off of their bed. All those people saw Jesus as a healer and a teacher. They saw Jesus for who God had called Jesus to be. Every house Jesus preached in was so packed, it was standing room only. One time, they even cut a hole in the roof to get somebody into the place. That was all in Capernaum. But when Jesus gets up to read, the people thought Jesus would say a few nice words in his hometown that would make the congregation feel good about themselves. But he did not do that. When Jesus was standing before the people, he saw them congratulating themselves on how good a speaker Jesus was. They were taking all the credit for the person that Jesus had become, for the things he'd done in other cities, rather than giving that credit to Jesus or to God. So Jesus told his hometown boys and girls what he was feeling and thinking about that. And in some places, we call that giving someone a piece of your mind. So he does this by reminding the congregation of their old shared stories about the prophets, Elijah and Elisha, the things that happened to a soldier named Naaman, the ways in which prophets supported those who were not Israelites. Jesus is there to let his hometown folk know that God is not all about hometown values. God is all about a love that's much bigger than a small town, the love of God that's for everyone. The people in his hometown didn't like that. They wanted God's love and Jesus' miracles to be mostly just for them. So through the stories he shared, Jesus pretty much says to them, you think that because you saw me grow up, you know who I am. But if you can't be excited for my Hot Wheels, if you can't be excited for what God's doing in my life, then you don't actually know me. At home, people wanted Jesus to be the way that he had been raised to be. And when they realized that he wasn't the adult they thought that he should be, they started to hate on him. So I think, Elby, we should help Jesus figure out what he should do with all those mean things that people were saying. Yeah. So could you help me figure out how to shake it off?
Yes.
Okay, let's listen and see if we can hear the music. Shake it off. You gotta shake it off. Shake it off. Yeah. That's good. Ooh, I like that move. That was a good move. Good shaking it off. So Jesus shows us that you have to shake it off. All those things the haters say, and we're going to see how. So psychologists tell us that home is supposed to be a predictable and secure place. We all need a physical place of predictability and security as we develop into adulthood. But once we're adults, we have to decide for ourselves which part of that childhood home we're going to keep and which parts we're going to leave behind. Hometowns can remain somewhat unchanged during our adolescences, but during adolescence, people change a lot. People grow, and they become who they are, whether we want them to be or not. So if we don't allow our children to grow and to change, and we try to freeze them in time with our expectations of who they're supposed to be, then we stop unconditionally loving the very kids we watched grow up, from diapers to adulthood. And hometowns no longer become places of security, but places of unmanageable expectation for those whom we say we love the most. Jesus shows us in this story about his hometown visit that as human beings, we each have to stand up for who we are and who God has called us to be. And divinity is no exception. Jesus has to do it too. He knows that telling people in your hometown you can't be what they want you to be isn't going to be easy, but he does it anyway. And he makes everyone uncomfortable. The people in Jesus' story choose to be haters. Their fists tighten, their jaws clench, and the crowd that was once so self-congratulatory, so proud of their hometown-made Jesus, begins to yell at him and push him and shove him out the door of their place of worship until he's on the edge of a cliff. And it was probably really scary for Jesus, I think. Not just to face all of them with the truth about himself, but to face their rage, their rejection and rage against who he was. But even though he might have felt sad, hurt, afraid, you know what he did, right?
What?
He shook it off. Let's shake it off one more time. Ready? Shake it. Yeah. That's awesome. Shake it. That's a different way, yeah. Okay, you can go sit back down. So Jesus shows us that we can't control what other people think about us, but we do get to choose how we're going to respond. The text tells us that as the crowds pushed him to the edge of a cliff, Jesus passed through the midst of them and went on his way. Now, some say this had to be a miracle of Jesus, like maybe he turned invisible, or maybe he performed mind control to get everyone to move. He kind of parted the Red Sea of people. But I don't think that's what happened. I think he just shook off all the hyped up anxiety and anger of the people around him. I think that first trip back home reminded Jesus that he didn't need the approval of anyone but God and himself to live his life. So no matter what age you are, each one of you is loved by God just as you are. And no matter your age, you should always surround yourself with people who see you like God does. And when you can't, you should shake it off. Be around those who celebrate all the weird things that make you uniquely you, like healing people or raising them from the dead. Especially if those weird things about you are ultimately kind and loving things. Because that's what Jesus' work as a teacher, as a prophet, as a healer was ultimately about, showing how to love God, how to love others, and how to love yourself. So the next time a hater's hating, what are y'all going to do? Shake it off. Shake it off and be on your way.